Welcome to Do You Ever Wonder? The show that brings you answers to many of the questions that you may have, but with no one to ask. Do You Ever Wonder is hosted by Mike Haltman, CEO of Hallmark Abstract Service, who, like you, has always been deeply curious about a wide variety of topics. Each week, Mike will be speaking with guests who are leaders in their field and who have inspirational stories to tell. So now, sit back and enjoy the show.
So welcome, my name is Mike Haltman. I am your host tonight, and the reason I'm smiling is because our guest tonight, who I'm very excited to have on because she addresses an area that is important to my business, and I could do it a hell of a lot better, I'm sure. But the reason I'm smiling is because some of what she works with is branding and marketing strategy, and people have told me that when you play the intro music, and I'm just staring and you're just staring, that maybe there's a better way to do it. And I'm not exactly sure what that is, but all good. So to introduce our guest, Mary Elizabeth Elkordy, she is the founder of Elkordy Global Strategies. It is a PR and marketing strategy and brand strategy firm. And your tagline, if I'm correct, is "We're breaking news meets PR strategy."
Good job.
All right, well, welcome. Thank you. Well, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here on this lovely, somewhat spring-like afternoon in New York.
Incredible. I was out today, and it is kind of warm for the time, but I think that's a whole nother topic.
Oh, sure.
But the reason that I'm excited that you're here is in my regular job, when I'm not doing this, I own a company, and I spend a lot of time trying to create my brand and promote my brand and market my company, and it's not easy. And
it's not easy.
No, and it's great to have a professional who can bring some thoughts to the topic that can help maybe me and maybe other people, and maybe convince people that they're not capable of doing it themselves, and then ultimately have them contact you. But you have that's always good. That's always good.
I won't say no.
That's why that's a good business strategy too. So you have many academic achievements, but the one that caught my eye the most and impressed me the most is that you got your undergraduate degree from SUNY Albany, and that you're a Great Dane.
Yeah, I went there for a year and a half, some of my best years. I did love SUNY quite a bit. UA, that's if you're from Albany, you know those words very well.
The words?
UA, that's like anytime you use a reference that brings it back to an experience you would only know in Albany, you always say UA, because like UA means U Albany, It
was developed after I left.
You missed out, clearly.
But you know what? When I was there, the campus center had a bar. So
well, that's not a thing now.
That's not a thing. And it had a pool hall. I don't know if it still has that.
I've played pool in the top of my dorm quite often. When I got bored, I would play pool.
Big fan of the pool hall, going playing 9-ball for money, but that was a long time ago.
So you're Mr. Phil. So you're gonna just like from Fresh Prince, where he does the one round, pretend he can't play, and then he like knocks everyone out. Okay, now I know how to not play against you.
You gotta hustle. You always gotta hustle.
That's I believe in the art of the hustle heavy. So
tell me a little bit about your company and your value proposition that you bring to your clients.
Sure. So I run Elkordy Global, as you so kindly mentioned. We are a full service PR firm. It's been around for almost 3 years. Started during the pandemic. I was side hustling before. Was very nervous to start my own company in my late 20s, because I'm like, I think people have this conception of like time bound achievements. Like, oh, I have to wait till I'm not going to start a company until my 40s or my 50s, or until I have a certain title at a certain company. The pandemic kind of threw all of that out the window. So I had some side hustle clients, turned into a business, and now we have a team of 27 throughout the country. A couple people that work with us overseas as well. Our bread and butter is media relations, so helping to get an individual, a startup, a brand, an established brand into TV, radio, print, and news and online outlets, but we also do social media, digital marketing, and influencer outreach. Not to dive super deep into it, but I think our special sauce are two things really. Our people, number one. I hire for hustle, number one, over everything. So like I can teach someone everything. I mean, we do have very skilled people. A third of our team are former newsroom execs, but I do believe in hiring people who have an innate care. Like it's not something I can't teach care. I can teach skills. I can and teach hustle, care, and striving to always want to go above and beyond. And I think that there are certain questions I ask people when I interview them that I kind of get a sense of that out the break, but I can share that at some point. And then the second is really just our mentality of how we go about with news. So we say we have a breaking news mentality. So we're always trying to make sure that we can make it, relevant into the news cycle.
That's great. And you talked about how you can't teach hustle. I used to coach basketball. You also can't coach
I
heart.
used to play basketball too.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, pretty good. Center.
Freeport. No.
No, not Freeport, Queens.
Ooh, tough. So you must be tough.
I'm tough as nails. That's right. I'm kidding, but I'm competitive. So I don't like playing basketball anymore because I don't like showing my overly competitive side to people.
I was just talking to somebody yesterday. He plays, I forget what sport he's over 50. And, he plays hockey. And I said, do people.
Love hockey.
Hockey's great. But I said, do people still, it's got to be pretty heavy contact. And he said, not so much at our age. But I said, when you get into it, it's hard to pull back. It's hard to lose the competitive juices. You kind of always have to go for it. But let me ask you this. So I was going to talk about it later and ask you about it later. But you talked about how you started your company and you didn't abide by the typical boundaries that our social norms inflict on us. And I know that many years ago, I mean, you're young, but it was years ago you did a TED Talk and you actually talked.
I was super nervous back then.
You know what? I could tell that. I could tell. But still, you did it. But you talked about boundaries, how we have our own boundaries and then we have boundaries that other people inflict on us. So you didn't abide by the societal boundaries and you broke through any boundaries that surrounded you and you did what you wanted to do.
Sometimes I call it being stubborn.
Which is fine. I mean, I know all about stubborn. Stubborn is fine. But so you've come a long way in a short time, and you attribute that to just your go for it mentality?
I think go for it mentality. I also I have a wide network group of people who have been in like similar, who are like older than me, who could see something in me that I couldn't see in myself. In terms of they're like, oh, Mary, you're going to start a business someday. We believe that you're able to do this. Like, why aren't you doing this already? And so that's something that like I think a lot of people can see something in you even when you can't. And then when the opportunity comes, you always try to think of all the negative reasons on why you can't do something. And sometimes you just have to just stop and say like I can, because I saw this thing that someone asked someone, how do you have the confidence to do all this? It's not about the end point, it's just having the confidence to begin. And I think a lot of people get in their head and they think about all the things that have not worked out in their life, like anything that you do, right? Like anything that's significant, that takes a heavy amount of emotional toll and care. There's always this real hesitance of taking that leap,
But it's
so yeah.
typically it's a leap worth taking. I was actually in a group meeting today and I was talking about how there's a big difference between mistakes and stupidity. And that in life, if we don't have enough mistakes, then we're really not pushing ourselves hard enough.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like I always people, when I have my team and they have issues or stuff like that, and they, everyone has teachable moments. I don't call it like messing up or whatever other term you may use for it, because we've all been there. And I think the best way of making people feel safe is just showing that like you too have messed up, you too have made mistakes, you have been in their shoes. And sometimes the words of advice that you're giving them is not because you haven't made them. It may be because you made many of them and you've learned how to avoid it. moving forward. I think that there used to be this mentality that a CEO has to look like perfection, right? Like, they always smile. The CEOs always smile at all points in time, and you just never know what they're really thinking. Unfortunately, that's not my face. I wish sometimes it was, but I think it just humanizes you in a way that makes you approachable and relatable. And, one of the reasons why people say they like working with me so much is they say I'm like, no BS. Right. And at first I'm like, is that I'm like, did they just curse at me? Like, what? And I took a moment to pause. I'm like, oh, I guess it's a good thing. Like, I'm no frills. Like, whatever. And I guess it's a New Yorker in me, right?
I think people get anxious when they lose control of their situation, and if you don't know where you stand. I mean, I own a company now, and I early in my career when I got out of business school, I was on trading floors, and you're always wondering, my boss didn't say hello to me really nice today. What's up? What did I do? You're always interpreting things that may or may not, or probably are typically never real. But it's good to know where you stand 100%. It takes some of the anxiety out of it.
Well, I think especially when you make that transition from being like an employee to an employer, it's just a completely different mindset. When you're an employee, you think about you. You think about everything like, why didn't I get this raise? Why didn't I get this promotion? Like, why did it may have nothing to do with you, but when you're in it and you don't know the other perspective, it's really hard to like think that like maybe there's another reason why they did something, or maybe maybe this person didn't talk to me not because of me but because they're very busy, but you get in your own head, especially when you're new and you're starting new in a new place. But when you're an employer, all you think about is everybody else. Like, I don't think about me. All I think about is my whole team constantly. It's not about me, which is a very different transition, I think, for people.
Well, and I tell my kids, sometimes you perceive how somebody acts or doesn't act, and I always tell them everyone has complicated lives, and you can't tell what just happened to somebody. Did they have a fight? Did they have, who knows? But we always personalize things because I guess we're a very egocentric society. But
But yet it's a society that's becoming more empathetic in order for you to survive in the way that people are looking to have employers now. Like I find that like being an employer is not just being someone's boss. Sometimes I feel like I'm people's therapist, right? Like, I'm not like a clinical or anything like that, but people, you want to give someone the benefit of the doubt, first of all. But when someone messes up, just like I always, even with clients, like sometimes you'll have a day that a client goes off at you and it's like not normal. And sometimes you have to pause and like not think it's about you. And like I like, even with like personal and professional, I have to do like the math in my head of like the history. I'm like, okay, this is off. Like, let's think about the timeline, or like, is there something going on in their company, or who do they report to? And more often than not, unless you have a history of that happening, it has nothing to do with you. It just is pressure or something else. And I think the more that you're able to remove yourself and put yourself in someone else's shoes, the better, because I think the number one conflict is when you mix up emotion and logic. I feel like that's the hardest thing to teach people, because like when it's emotional, it's impulsive, and you go on impulse more than you go on logic, and that's when you get in trouble.
and just to go into one more example, and then maybe we'll talk about public relations and marketing. But, a good example for me is when I'm driving and somebody cuts me off. Well, they don't know me, and they did what they did, but it wasn't really a personal thing. But I take it very personally, and then your your emotions get the better of me, which I probably should stop doing in this day and age, because I don't know if somebody's going to shoot me. But you got to try and be more introspective and understand where people are coming from. But that driving thing drives me crazy. But
And that's I think that's one of the reasons I've avoided getting my license for so many years. Is not about me driving. It's all the other crazy drivers who just like don't signal, just like cut across lanes. And I call people like more and more people want to drive like Fast and the Furious, but during traffic, I'm like, why does this need to happen? But I hear you.
I agree. But when I taught my three kids, although some of them say I didn't teach them, but I always say it's not you. You got to look out for the other idiots on the road. That's the key. So In terms of my company, just to go back to marketing and branding and public relations, so I try and get onto news shows, I try and get onto radio shows, I try and get published, and I've been somewhat successful on a small basis, but it's a hard thing to do, to pitch someone and get them interested, and they don't know you from anything, and it's very, I mean, I got onto one radio show, it's a nationally syndicated show, and I forget how I did that, but it's difficult. So is public relations a job done better by the professionals than by the amateurs?
I mean, I think when you just have, like, for instance, like I've worked in news for a long time, so I'm used to taking pitches from everybody and anything. I think it's easier when you understand what the reporters are looking for or what their editors are looking for. It just makes it easier. But if you're like an average person, I think oftentimes when you own your own business, your business is everything, right? Like you think everything that you do is important, and you might not think that way, but a lot of people do, right? And sometimes reporters don't feel as invested in your business as you do. And so what they have to think about is like, how does this fit into a news cycle or into something that my editor would approve and that is relevant to my audience? So for instance, you do title insurance, correct? So like, for instance, I have friends who work in like auto. What?
You can do my tagline.
What the tagline? Well, I'm sorry, I didn't do your tagline. But for instance, the flood that happened recently, right? Like I would have suggested for a lot of people in insurance that they should have been pitching themselves about educating people about what the different types of insurance options that they have. What are the things they should be looking for? What are the photos they should be taking to get certain claims, right? Because like that's a perfect moment to get you out there in a way that's authentic, where you're not being a car salesman, right? You're educating people, but by educating people about what they don't know, you're telling people about what you do know. And by telling people about what they do know, they trust you as a source, and then they want to come to you for business.
So I did that recently. Suffolk County had a computer hack and their systems were down. And I actually got on Channel 5 News and I got on Channel 2 News. Oh, thank you very much. Most of it went on the cutting room floor, but
usually that's how it goes.
yeah, yeah. But it was a great opportunity just to get little snippets that where you can promote yourself. But it is the success ratio for someone like me versus someone like you. It's got to be astronomical in terms of the difference.
Well, I think it's just how you write your pitch is very important. How you frame yourself, right? Like sometimes they'll like, you might be a title insurance expert. Like I wouldn't put your name in the subject line ever, right? Because to a reporter, even if you put my name in the subject line, right, they don't know me like in terms of as an expert. But if you put digital nomad or futurist expert, people want to talk to me all the time, right? Or remote work expert. It's all about how you frame yourself. And then like down the line, when they have other stories, like people are inherently lazy, right? So they're just going to go in their email box and put in like Democratic strategist, right? And they'll see all the pitches that came in from other people, and they find one that fits what they need at that moment, right? Because like a reporter typically is working on anywhere between 5 to 7 stories at a given time. Not all of them are due that day, but like sometimes I talk to 20 people a day, 15 people a day. And so it's not about you, it's about what you bring to the table that helps them with what they need, right? And then when they realize that you're a source, then they start coming to you when things like the flood happen or something else happens, right? And then as you start building these clips, then that's when you do the proactive pitching, right? Where you're bringing something to the table, or we're doing a campaign on you because we already have the credibility sauce. So I relate it like breaking news pitching and getting those clips to like a pizza place in New York, right? Like everyone says they have the best pizza. And there's like no way, right? Like unless Barstool Sports guy gives like the one bite slice guy gives it like a 9.2, which never happens, or 8.5. That's attainable. Or like, Triple D says it's like the news spot. You're going to like not always believe everyone, So it's when you get those reviews or that, confirmation from people that you trust, then people will be more likely open to doing something that is more forward looking instead of reactive.
Right. So If you're pitching something to a TV station, do you go to producers or do you go to the people who are doing the actual show?
No, you go to the booking producer. So there's a lot of different producers in the newsroom. There's assignment editors, which is a good one too, booking producers. Those would be the most recommended. You can go out to like reporters and stuff, but you have to really know their beat. Because like booking producers tend to be more wide in breadth, and so they're booking the guests for the shows. Reporters, work on packages, so they're not as concerned about as many guests because they're working on a specific story. And typically, if you work with a reporter, unless you're like a very well-known person or like the guy, you're likely only going to get like a short snippet, which is still valuable, but it's not like a full sit down. You're in studio or you're on Zoom, for like 4 or 5 minutes. So those are just different things to consider.
No, that's all good information and advice. I know that I mean, I don't even know how many people actually look to do that kind of stuff. I mean, I think in my industry, not so many. I'm sure in other industries, very many. But I mean, there are crowded industries and then there are more unique industries. So if you're in a crowded industry, it's probably a little bit tougher to get that kind of recognition from news places.
I think it's more so about your background more so than it being a crowded industry, and like your relevancy to the topic and having something of value to say. Because I've had people who have no footprint get tons of coverage on things that you would never expect them to get coverage on that quickly because they just were available at the right time with the right expertise.
Right. And how much does luck come into? I mean, I guess luck does come into it quite a bit if you're in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, there's some luck, but it's also just writing it in the right way. And that's one of my chief barking officers. But yeah, writing it in the right way, framing it in the right way, and then over time, connections that you build and relationships that you build. But I mean, timing definitely plays a factor. So there's some element of luck. Like not every day is there going to be something that hits the fan.
Yeah. Well, that brings me to another question. This news cycle spins very quickly. So if you have a client who is a good fit for something, how much time do you have to get them in?
Sorry. So typically, when a news story or a breaking news moment happens, we share it with the client as soon as possible, just saying like, hey, we just saw this. Would you be open to speaking about it? And if they say yes, we try to get something out within a couple of hours to the next morning, depending on when the news hits. Because you basically want to make it before they have to close for the day or, before the filing deadlines are.
You're pretty much on call 24/7.
Yes and no. It just depends on how big the story is. Because like some stories are like big, but you know that they're gonna last for a while, like Tesla stories or crypto stories, and it's just like something happens and it's gonna because like at some parts of the night, something big might happen, but sending an email at like midnight is not gonna do you any good. You're just gonna, make people mad at you that you're like bothering them at midnight. So that could wait till like 8 a.m. or
So
6 a.m.
just taking notes, don't try not to piss people off.
Basically, I was trying to dilute it a little bit. Yeah, but you don't want to piss people off. You don't want to make enemies.
Right. Always good, no matter what you do.
True.
Enemies bad, friends good. That's my philosophy. So now you're in the PR business. How do you get PR for you?
So I have my team members who do it. I don't really pitch myself. I don't like the idea of pitching myself, to be honest. It's like if you submit yourself for an award and you talk about how great you are, I'm good. I don't want to do that. It feels weird and feels not natural. I mostly don't focus about talking about PR, actually. I talk about helping people start their businesses, how to start a side hustle, how to turn it into a business, running a remote work company, commenting on different, work issues as an owner. So like, for instance, I'm evil because I don't believe in the 4-day work week. I don't think as a business owner, depending on your industry, it's feasible. But so like things like that I'll comment on. And even though it's not about PR, people like a lot of what I say enough that they'll email the company, and we'll get sometimes inbounds for me just talking about things that have nothing to do with PR. I find that people are more so invested in the thoughts and beliefs and the perspective and mindset of the owner than more so like the topics of what you do at all times, right? Especially in PR, because there's such a stigma of like a PR car salesman who's just like telling you these things just so like, you know, that you can do it and then that's it, you know. I think that there's a healthy balance. I mean, like I speak at conferences and stuff like that, like helping businesses, like again, turn their concept into a business, or when they're at a growth stage, and people really resonate. It seems like people resonate with what I say, and then people come up to me, right? So sometimes it has nothing, when you talk about things in PR, sometimes the best things have nothing to do with your company, right? Because your people are investing in the person usually, especially if it's a certain type of company, not like a product, because products are pretty cut and dry.
Well, people want to do business with people who they like, kind
Yeah.
of. But so you mentioned that you comment on things, and I know that I comment on things too, and I have very strong opinions, but my kids have told me to stop doing that because it's not necessarily a productive thing to get involved in controversial situations that, you know, are polarizing, and half the people are on one side and half the people are on the other side. So,
Yeah, I can see that. What?
do you agree with that?
I think it depends on the topic. And I think it depends on who your audience of customers are and how much do you believe your customers, from just like analyzing them, how news conscious are they?
That's
You
always a
know?
good question. I mean, I know how news conscious I am, and I think a lot of people are not.
Well, so like if you've done interviews in the past and you haven't gotten blowback, then maybe it's not really a problem for you. But I think a lot of people get, you know, always try to think the worst before they think the best, out of care, you know, for you. And that's never a bad thing. But I think, you know, it just depends on what you feel like is worth it for you, you know?
Uh, so I typically I used to write a political blog many years ago, and I don't anymore. But sometimes I'll comment on something, and my son will say, "What the hell are you doing? You can't do that." So I try and be very careful.
I mean, because of like, I have a heavy political background and I've worked on both sides, you know, whether it's like producing for like Republican shows or working with Democrats, I choose to not share my beliefs because it's like all over the place. And I think, you know, I like people having a mystery of never knowing what I think.
That's good.
You know, I mean, well, because then I can't hurt anyone, especially because we work with politics a little bit, right? So is it really worth it for me to share it? Not at this moment. If I ran for office someday, then I obviously have to. But outside of that, I don't.
You don't want to. You don't want to ever try. You don't really want to be pigeonholed, I guess.
Mm,
Is it?
no.
So now, how many clients do you have now?
We range between anywhere from 55 to 70.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
You got them all organically, pretty
Yep.
much.
All me. Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's
It's a lot of work. I had some meetings in the city and my friend was like, you just have calls nonstop. I'm like, yeah, basically. All I do is talk. Talk, talk, talk.
great. But you have staff you can count on, who you can rely on, who can
Yeah.
cover
But
for you, and
my job is helping to bring in the cash money. So bring in the business.
that's you know what that falls to me a lot of the time. But yeah, no, it's a that if you have business development people, that's fantastic.
We just got one
Yeah.
to help me.
No, that's extremely important. So, if somebody watching this wanted to reach out to you, how would they do that?
They can go to elkordyglobal.com. That's ELKORDY, global.com, or you can find me on Instagram or LinkedIn at Mary Elkordy. So that's ELKORD as in David Y. And then on the website, you'll find my what?
Spelling change any other places, or it's always going to be Elkordy?
Yeah, just in case, because sometimes people mishear it. So I just repeat it one more time. But yeah,
That's
basically find me.
I was going to ask you something else, but I forgot. But I got to tell you, it was truly a pleasure having you on. It was a great conversation, and I appreciate the insights, and hopefully I can work to improve my footprint, or I may be calling you someday.
Sure. I mean, it sounds like you're doing a good job on your own, but we're always happy to help.
Trying. All right, well, I hope to see you again soon, and by then you'll have 300 clients.
Oof, that sounds like that. Don't overwhelm me the second.
What will be doing your next TED Talk?
TED Talk, sure. Yes.
All right. Well, keep up the great work, and your dog is very cute. Your chief barking officer is very cute.
Well, I'm glad to know, because he definitely barked a couple moments during this. So thanks.
Well, my dog comes to the office every day.
Nice.
Dogs. Well, you take care and have a great night.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Do You Ever Wonder? And we hope that you enjoyed the show. Next week, we will have another terrific guest telling their story. And if there are any specific topics you'd like to hear more about, please don't hesitate to let us know. Our curiosity, like yours, knows no bounds. Please subscribe and like and share this episode on your social media. See you next week.